Hola. Okay, question number two also has multiple questions within it. The first one being, what is daily life like? Um, Presuming that means just for the community at large of Cervantes. Obviously, in any town, there are going to be many, many different um, routines that people have. But what daily life looks like for me and my family, who are more or less a traditional average family for the region, is that my host dad wakes up really early, about 5 a.m., to leave by about 5:30 or 6 to go work on a farm that belongs to him and his brothers and that side of the family. And that is predominantly how they make their living, how my host family makes their living, through um, growing vegetables and harvesting them and then selling them at farmers markets. And all of that work for my host dad involves him getting up really early, uh, Tuesday through Sunday. Monday is his day off. And then he usually gets home in the early afternoon, about 1 or 2 p.m. And I know that you ask a little later on in this question, is there a siesta? I can kind of touch on that right now. So they don't have a formal siesta hour here. I think in Spain, like stores even shut down for siesta in the middle of the day or lunchtime. And so they don't have that sort of siesta per se here, but around 3, there's no hard and fast rule, but around 3 or 4 p.m., it's really common to have a coffee break, which you can call café, or in a more Costa Rican way, cafecito. They like making things diminutive. Cafecito. And you can think of cafecito as sort of being like your stereotypical British tea time event. It usually involves just sitting around and drinking coffee with some pastries. And that usually happens around 3 or 4. And the reason that came to mind is because I said that my host dad comes home at 2 in the afternoon, which usually nicely corresponds with him coming home for like cafecito time. So there's that for my host dad. My host mom is a custodian or janitor at a nearby elementary school. And so her daily work schedule, she either gets up super early, like 4:30 or 5 a.m., to get to work by 6:30, or she works an afternoon shift and leaves closer to, I think like 8 or 9 in the morning. And then she comes back in the later afternoon, so we're thinking like 4 or 5 p.m. And I have 2 host siblings that live at home with me. I have a host sister, and she's 16, so she's in a local high school. And I hope this doesn't sound terrible, but in spite of the fact that I do work in the high school in my community, for the life of me, I can never understand their schedules. It's like, on any given day, the day that they decide to go into school can change. The educational system is a little up in the air here. But generally speaking, she goes to high school in the morning. But it's not like the traditional American high school experience where you have to be in your first period class by 8 a.m. every day. It's sort of like, oh, Monday, the teacher told us that he's going to have a doctor's appointment and we don't have substitute teachers in Costa Rica, so I don't need to go to school until 11. Or like, oh, this is exam week, so I only need to go to school on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday and be there from like 1 to 3 p.m. It's kind of strange how their schedule works. And they like their holidays. So there's that. I also have an 11-year-old host brother, and he goes to the local elementary school. And elementary school here is 1st through 6th grade, and high school is either 7th through 11th grade or 7th through 12th grade. It depends on if you go to an academic high school or a technical high school. An academic high school goes through grade 11, and a technical high school goes through grade 12. And the idea that if that you graduate from an academic high school, that you will go on to study at university. And if you study at a technical high school, that you will be more prepared to get a job straight out of high school. But that would be more of a service industry job, They have concentrations in technical high schools, so you can like concentrate in uh, hotel management and tourism, or specifically in English, which kind of trains people to work in call centers, which are really popular here. You can also have more of like an animal husbandry and ranching farming concentration. I think they also have more like mechanical and plumbing routes too. Um, and while that sort of sounds like a vocational school in the U.S., which are usually like nighttime classes at a high school, which I think are kind of thought of in more of like a bad light, here the technical high schools are really nice. Like, so I don't mean to be saying that you work in the service industry and the students that study at these high schools are kind of like meh, and the ones at the academic high school are better. It's not. That's not the case. It really depends on the high school. So I have a host brother who's 11, and he goes to school at the local elementary school, and yeah, the schedules are just as hard to predict at the elementary school as they are at the high school. In part, at the elementary school, they also have a problem because they service, or they have like 800 students, I think, is the total that go there, but the facilities can only hold about half that. So what they do is they have half the students come for the first half of the day and the other half come for the second half of the day, but it's not consistently like, oh, you are always going to come during the first half of the day. Sometimes they switch it up, and sometimes they have random changes in the schedule. It's strange. Oh, it's also pretty common here that teachers will have some sort of national teachers union conference, and they're just all of them decide to go, and then there are no classes for a day. Or yeah, like I said, teachers can take personal leave and they don't get substitute teachers. Teachers go on strike. Last year there was a strike, una huelga, because the Ministry of Public Education in Costa Rica had not paid its teachers in months. And so all of the teachers in all of the public schools, which is the vast majority of the schools throughout the country, went on strike because they weren't getting paid. And so they didn't teach classes for a month. At least a month. It might have been like 6 weeks. And so kids just didn't go to school for 6 months, and it was smack dab in the middle of the semester. And then they came back, and then when they finally got paid and the teachers came back and ended the strike, they had 1 week of classes and then 2 weeks of summer vacation. So, not to solely paint the Costa Rican educational system so darkly, but this is to say that I hope you don't judge me for not being able to totally understand and predict their schedules, because they are very liable to change, let's say. As for my own personal daily life schedule, it really changes from day to day. I am constantly juggling different projects, and what is a project? For example, I recently received these manuals, actually from South Africa, that came with a free soccer ball, that is about how to teach kids about sexual education and HIV prevention via soccer exercises and stuff involving physical activity. So this is a project that I have going on in conjunction with the PE teacher at the high school. Another one of my projects would be that I help out about once a week at the drug and alcohol rehab center that I mentioned. It's about a 20-minute bus ride from my community. And I go there, and I've helped with English classes. I taught them dodgeball. We've had ping pong tournaments. Like a month ago, was International Mother Language Day, so we talked about all the different languages that are spoken in Costa Rica, because they have a lot of indigenous communities here that are often neglected. And so we kind of talked about them some. So the classes that I run there really run the gamut. And I also recently requested a grant from the U.S. Embassy of Costa Rica for about $3,000 to buy some computers for my high school. And I recently got the money for that, so hopefully next week, or maybe this week, I'll be going with the librarian from the high school to go buy those computers. So those are some of the projects that I have going on, and really my work schedule depends on what I need to do for all of those projects on any given day. For example, today, after I finish answering some, if not all of these questions, I need to head to the high school to go talk to this librarian about what we're going to do about buying the computers. But just to maybe give you some insight into how much variety there is in my schedule, like yesterday I've had very little going on, and so I went to Cartago, which is a nearby city of about 100,000, so it's pretty big. It's a 45-minute bus ride away, and I needed to go there to just clear up some stuff with my phone bill because the phone company was giving me trouble, and I had to go get passport pictures taken to fill out this visa application form for my visa application for Spain. And then I needed to write lots of emails to the Spanish consulate of Houston and then the Spanish embassy of Costa Rica, my boss's in Peace Corps, and then I also needed to talk to my parents about all of this coming home and getting my visa fiasco, which was actually took up the majority of my day. So that kind of gives you some insight. Some days I have like very busy work days. Some days I have these personal days, but I'm still busy doing something. Or some days on a Sunday I have nothing to do and I'll watch like 3 movies. And I also do try to travel. I haven't gone on any trips recently, but I was, for example, able to go to Nicaragua for about 10 days in February. So every once in a while I do have a trip in there. And that was a 11-minute answer to say, what is daily life like? What do people and children do for recreation? Question number 2 within question number 2. Hands down, the most common sport and pastime is soccer. Soccer, by far and away, is the most popular thing here. Obviously, it's most popular with men, but as far as playing it goes, but also that's not to say that women and girls don't play it. They definitely do. But it's definitely more of a guy thing here. However, watching soccer is popular among everyone. And they have multiple national Costa Rica soccer leagues, such as La Liga Deportiva de Alajuela, which is called La Liga, and Saprissa, which is the team from San Jose. Alajuela is another province. San Jose is a province, as well as a city within the province. And those are the 2 big teams, but there are other teams. Cartago, the big city close to me, has their own soccer team. And altogether, I think there are 9 of these like national level soccer teams. And so there's always some game going on, and people are always wearing jerseys and getting excited about that. One sort of interesting thing about Costa Rica, I mentioned, I think in the last question, that because Costa Rica is kind of geographically close to the United States, relatively speaking, it is kind of subject to a lot of influence from the United States, which in a lot of ways includes popular culture, so movies and TV shows and music. But it's sort of interesting that it also includes large-scale societal trends. I think that it's kind of safe to say that in the U.S. within the last decade, that recreational running has really become a thing. That you see a lot more people doing races, and sports gear is really becoming a bigger deal. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of also true of yoga too, I guess you could say. And in both the instance of running and yoga a little bit less so. Those are definitely becoming trends here in Costa Rica, but I feel like they're sort of maybe 5 years behind us. So running, I would also say, is another developing, ever-increasing pastime in Costa Rica. As sort of an aside, I think some other funny examples of these large-scale societal trends that are kind of trickling down to Costa Rica is also that, you know how frozen yogurt exploded in the United States within the last, 5-6 years? It's just now getting to Costa Rica. Last year there was this big explosion of frozen yogurt places in Costa Rica. And then, not to touch on anything inappropriate, but I feel like craft beer has also become a new trendy hip thing in the United States in the last, 5 or 6 years. And now it's just reaching Costa Rica. And I think that's really funny because it's just these sort of just large societal trends in the United States kind of trickling their way down to Costa Rica. Watching TV is definitely a big pastime. I lived with 2 host families since being in Costa Rica, one during my pre-service training and one in site. Both of them love TV. So I should also say that watching television is a form of recreation here too. What sports do they play? So soccer, like I said, is the big one. Surprisingly, volleyball is pretty popular here. American football, not so much. Basketball, somewhat, but I have yet to actually see any actual basketball teams, whereas I have seen volleyball teams and competitions and stuff. And the kids at the rehab center where I work had never heard of dodgeball, so people don't play dodgeball here, but I taught it to them. Do students wear uniforms and learn English in school? Yes and yes. In every public high school in Costa Rica, you're required to wear a uniform, and that uniform is decided upon by that specific school, so it varies from school to school. But it also makes it kind of easy to spot a kid from your school from afar. The kids at my high school were lime green polos. So if, for example, I'm in Cartago, which is 45 minutes away, so I don't usually see kids from my community there every time I go. But if you go and see a kid in a lime green polo, it's like, oh, you go to my high school. And do they learn English? Yes, they're supposed to. So all academic curriculum in Costa Rica is mandated by the Ministry of Public Education, el Ministerio de Educación Pública, the MEP. And they manage all of the English curriculum, and they have said that they want English to be taught in all elementary schools from grade 1 to grade 11 or 12, depending on which high school you go to. And so all elementary schools in all colegios. So yes, students receive English, but they don't receive classes every single day. And there is definitely a problem with the training of English teachers in Costa Rica. From my experience and other Peace Corps experiences, Peace Corps volunteers' experiences from pretty much across the board, you encounter very marginal English levels amongst the English teachers, which I'm sorry I didn't say negative things about Costa Rica and the educational system again, but it's not universally true, but it is very common. However, that is specifically why there are TEFL, Teachers of English as a Foreign Language, Peace Corps volunteers in Costa Rica, and a lot of them have been working in conjunction with the MEP, the Ministerio de Educación Pública, to actually revamp the English curriculum that will be taught nationwide. And some other Peace Corps volunteers within that TEFL project are actually working to create a English week, which would be like, they want to have a national spelling bee competition during this English week in San Jose. Like certain kids from different high schools would be invited to participate in the national spelling bee, and then they also want to have kids perform plays in English and have cool different things like that. So Peace Corps is trying to stimulate English education in Costa Rica. As sort of an aside though, English is very common in Costa Rica, especially in a lot of service industry places that serve tourists. There are a lot of American, but also a lot of international tourists here, but English is essentially the international language of choice in Costa Rica. So even if you're a German tourist, you're probably going to have to talk, if you don't speak Spanish, you'll probably have to speak in English to the people at your restaurants and hotels and stuff. And a lot of people in hotels and restaurants do know some basic English. So even if the level isn't great, English is very common in Costa Rica. And okay, so that ends it for question number 2. I hope these messages aren't too long and aren't too boring, but I did want to touch on sort of all aspects of these questions. Okay, so hasta luego, and I'll see you in question number 3.